On the line with us is Professor Stephen Cohen, the contributing editor to The Nation, thenation.com, Professor Emeritus of Russian Studies and Politics at NYU and Princeton. His book, Soviet Fates and Lost Alternatives, which examines the new Cold War, is available in paperback. His writings over at thenation.com. And Professor Cohen, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom.
I am curious your thoughts on this disaster, this crash of this airplane over eastern Ukraine.
Well, help me. Where should we start?
How it's being played by the American press, how it's being played by the Russian press, what probably happened, how we got here. These are all questions that I don't know the answers to.
Well, I know the answer to the question how we got here because you and I have talked about it for, I guess, 2 months now.
Yeah.
How it's being played in the two media is also not surprising to you or me. Alas, the American mainstream Putin press is saying essentially somehow, directly or indirectly, the shoot down of that commercial aircraft is the fault of Russian President Vladimir Putin. It's rather torturous the way they come to that, but it's something like Putin created this crisis in the Ukraine. He gave weapons to the separatists. They weren't separatists, by the way, when it began. They were fighting for home rule. They're probably separatists now, having been bombed for a month by the Ukrainian government. And that somehow he's responsible and he's got to make amends and be punished. And that's what's going on now, hectoring, lecturing, imposing more sanctions on Putin, basically blaming Russia without any introspection as to our role. In Russia, it's, the mirror image. And you're getting some serious and some wacko counter-interpretation. The serious one is this is the fault of the United States, which empowered the Kiev government to wage a heavy artillery warplane attack on eastern cities in Ukraine. The rebels there got their hands on some air defense equipment. We don't know how sophisticated or what its range is. They had shot down Ukrainian warplanes with increasing frequency during the last 2 weeks under the mantra, we protect our own skies. You can't come and bomb our cities. Can't come and kill our women and children. And so whether they shot this down by accident, we don't yet know. There are some wacko, I don't know if they're wacko, but there's some extreme theories in Moscow that have been put out by certain agencies that, in fact, Putin was returning yesterday from Brazil, and he flew somewhere roughly over or below in that same corridor. His presidential plane looks a little bit, if you've only got one eye, like that Malaysian aircraft. And in fact, whoever shot it down was actually aiming at Putin's plane. I rule that out. But you're asking what the media reaction is. And since this crisis began, and I'll remind you, this is the worst American-Russian crisis since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think it's the worst international crisis in the world today, far exceeding in its potential impact on our lives and the world, what's going on in Gaza and Israel and in Iraq. As from the very beginning, you have two colliding narratives, the American and the Russian. And my position has been for the last 3 months in my writings and with you on the air that there is something very substantial in the Russian narrative that if we're going to have a political resolution, we have to take into account. And I would add only this, that these poor souls on this plane, nearly 300, are, if you think about it, the first non-residential victims of the new Cold War. In the previous Cold War, which lasted 45 years, planes were shot out of the air accidentally, on purpose. Innocents who had no relationship to either side died over the 45-year period.
A couple of Korean airline planes.
Exactly so. And now this new Cold War, which has been underway for at least, I'd say since February, what is that, almost 3 months, now it's claimed its first victims who do not even live in the region. There have been a lot of innocent victims. The Ukrainian government has killed a lot of people in the eastern Ukrainian cities, which have an affinity for Russia because although they're Ukrainians ethnically, Russian is their native language, and some of them are ethnic Russians. I'd like to talk about what's been going on there because I think that's the backdrop to how this horror happened, that air war.
Yeah, why don't you do that? And also highlight or explain what you meant when you said that these folks, the quote, rebels, who probably shot this plane out of the air, it's increasingly looking like that, I think, that they were not fighting to join Russia, that they were fighting for home rule. What does that mean? And how?
Well, we had 2 or 3 international polls, surveys of people living in what's actually southeast Ukraine that extends from Odessa, a city kind of known to many American Jews, for example, because a lot of our grandfathers immigrated from Odessa. It's this beautiful ocean, multi-ethnic city in southern Ukraine, and Crimea, which was annexed in March by Putin and is now part of Russia, eastward toward along the Russian border to what's called the Donbass, which is the heavy industrial defense complex part of Ukraine, was part of the Soviet Union, of course, but retains very strong economic links to Russia, and that's where these big industrial cities are, like Donetsk, which has 1 million people. That's where the 2 smaller cities, Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, which were battered into ruins, finally fell to the Ukrainian army, to the Kiev army, a couple weeks ago. Those people were polled, Tom, in, I think, November, December, January. Now, that's when the protest against the former Ukrainian government of elected President Yanukovych began in the streets of Kiev at the so-called Maidan. And when those polls were taken, it showed that more than 80% did not want to join Russia. They didn't want to become part of the Russian Federation. What they wanted was what the British call home rule, or more home rule, or what we call states' rights, or what's called internationally a federal system. Because the Ukrainian political system had been extremely unitary, power concentrated in Kiev. For example, and this is the most important example, of the regions of Ukraine, I forget how many there are, I think there are 18, there may be 20 some odd, which are roughly equivalent territorially to our states. Each has a governor. They were appointed by Kiev, either by the parliament or the president, but they were not elected in the regions. Therefore, the people who lived in these regions had no direct political representation on their own territory. They wanted that changed, and the reason they wanted it changed is that, as in the United States, a lot of states determine their own cultural, even their own economic relations. New York State, for example, has economic relations with other countries that have nothing to do with the federal government.
Right.
And also, by having local elections, you create a local political elite, a political class that has a stake in appeasing or winning over the constituency so it can win elections. We know that from the United States. But if you're appointing even mayors and you're appointing governors, they are obliged only to the capital. They have to appease Kiev, not their local voters.
So the mayors in these towns in southeast Ukraine were also appointed by Kiev?
It varied from territory to territory. But the point is that there was very little local representation in terms of power.
Right.
So one of the grievances, because the country is so split historically, ethnically, politically, culturally, religiously, is that people wanted to elect their own officials. That was an issue that led to the crisis, and that's what they were fighting for originally. Now,
remarkable. Professor Cohen, we have to take just a quick pause. We'll be right back with Professor Stephen Cohen.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
You can read Professor Cohen's writings over at thenation.com, and his book, Soviet Fates and Lost Alternatives, now out in paperback. We'll be right back. So, Professor Cohen, you were saying originally they were
not clamoring to leave Russia. In other words,
to leave Ukraine.
Leave Ukraine, yeah. Crimea was an exception. Almost 80% of the citizens of Crimea were ethnic Russians or spoke Russian as their only language.
Right.
Crimea had long been part of Russia. there had long been, since the end of the Soviet Union, a desire in Crimea to be territorially a part of Russia. When the crisis began and Putin became convinced, rightly or wrongly, that the fall of the Ukrainian government by a street mob and then backed by the White House and Europe was actually the beginning of a move on Crimea, where the Russian naval base is at Sevastopol, he moved toward the annexation of Crimea to protect it. That's what he thought he was doing. We interpreted it differently, but that was clearly the anxiety in Moscow. However, the rest of southeastern Ukraine, to repeat my point, back then, in early 2014, overwhelmingly, 80% wanted to remain in Ukraine. They just wanted a federal Ukrainian government. Now, I don't know, there haven't been any polls, but when you bomb these people relentlessly, creating maybe as many as 400,000 refugees who have fled to Russia, who are living in tent cities in Rostov province across the border, when you've killed, we don't have a civilian number, a non-combatant number, but it's surely in the thousands by now, and this includes women and children. And when you've leveled the infrastructure of these cities, I'm sure you're going to get a different result. The result, if you take a poll, people are going to say, we got to be in Russia, we got to be protected from these people. So I don't know what it is now, but it didn't begin that way. Look, Tom, the problem with our American understanding of this terrible crisis is our mainstream media has deleted so much of the story. Two things they've deleted. They've called all the fighters and resistance in southeastern Ukraine separatist. That is, they want to leave Ukraine. That was not so at the beginning. The other thing, and more important thing they've omitted, is they have deleted the bombardment of these cities by the American-backed government in Kiev, which has now been going on. Well, it's been going on since June, but it intensified on July 1. And that devastation led the rebels, as I call them, or the separatists, as the New York Times calls them, to try to defend the airspace over those cities. And beginning a few weeks ago, they began shooting down incoming Ukrainian aircraft. This was everything from convoy planes carrying military equipment and troops to fighter jets. In fact, it appears that the day the Malaysian aircraft was shot down yesterday, 2 or 3 hours earlier in the morning, the Ukrainian rebels shot down an incoming Ukrainian fighter jet. And we know that because the pilot bailed out and lived to tell the tale.
Is this the one that the intercepted phone conversation was referring to?
That's a fantastic question. I have listened to that so-called intercept where the rebel says either, and it depends on how you translate the Russian, because the verb could be translated two ways. Either we shot one down or they shot one down. But was he referring to the Malaysian aircraft or was he referring to the fighter jet?
Right. Okay. Let's get back to that in just a second. We have to take just a very quick break. We're with Professor Stephen Cohen, contributing editor to The Nation, thenation.com. We'll be right back. Hartmann here with you, Professor Stephen Cohen with us. His most recent article in The Nation, thenation.com, is titled Kiev's Atrocities and the Silence of the Hawks. We were just talking about how many of these, quote, rebels in southeast Ukraine wanted a federal system in their country. They wanted to be able to elect their own governors and mayors rather than having them appointed from Kiev, from the capital city, that they've been being bombed by Kiev over the last few weeks, that they've started now shooting down the planes that have been bombing their cities. And we were talking about this telephone conversation that was intercepted, that was put out yesterday by the Ukrainian government as evidence that these were the folks who shot down the Malaysian Airlines plane. Your thoughts on that?
3 capitals are providing information to you and me and the media, though I try to get some information elsewhere. One is Washington, one is Kiev, one is Moscow. They all lie now. They don't lie 100%. They lie some percent. And so it's left on people such as you and me to figure out what part of what they're saying is a lie. Kiev, however, is the biggest liar of them all. It lies more quantitatively than Moscow. The problem is Washington tends to repeat whatever Kiev says. So do the reporters for major American medias. They encamp in Kiev, or they take the statements of the Kiev government and they just repeat them. So how to evaluate this information, I don't know. But look, Tom, we may never know who shot down this airplane, or we may know. It all depends on whether the investigation is going to be politicized or not. Now, when the head of Malaysian, or the Prime Minister of Malaysia, tells us not to worry, Malaysia will get to the bottom of this, it's like a sick joke. They still can't find their lost aircraft.
Yeah.
So we are hardly going to rely on Malaysia.
In fact, people are making jokes right now that this finally we found the plane that was lost over the Pacific.
Well, actually, yesterday when I got up in the morning and heard about a plane on the ground, the first report I heard is that they'd found the missing Malaysian airliner. People thought at first that's the ruins of that was the airliner.
Yeah.
But I mean, that shows you that all of us are victim of a media atmosphere that's polarized and is distorted and is falsified either inadvertently or on purpose. But look, let's look at the consequences of this shoot down. First of all, 300 souls have been lost. Secondly, that was a very international flight. The majority of the people on there were Dutch because the plane originated in Amsterdam. So we've got a big political fallout. First of all, it deepens and prolongs the new Cold War. That's beyond any dispute. People who thought we might get out of this Cold War quickly and it wouldn't grow into a decades-long one, I argued otherwise. You remember, I've been arguing with you, I was saying on your show, that because the epicenter of this new Cold War is on Russia's borders, it can be more dangerous than the last one. Mm-hmm. So now you're getting a sense of what I was thinking about. Secondly, when this happened on the eve of it, France and Germany were resisting the White House hawkish position. They wanted a ceasefire so that negotiations began, and they thought Putin was at least 50% right. Now their political support may be lost because so many Europeans were on this plane and because it was so horrific. If European opinion blames Putin, not all of it will, but enough of it, Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, won't be able to play the role between Putin and Obama that she's been playing. That is, trying to get Obama to talk on a more negotiating basis with Putin.
Right.
Meanwhile, Putin's position in Russia, and if you look at my new article, The Silence of the Hawks, at The Nation, I give the evidence that Putin has been under tremendous pressure in Russia to intervene in Ukraine to protect these cities, to declare a no-fly zone. Now his position is even weaker in the sense of pressure on him. But there is one ray of light, and I hate to even mention it with 300 people dead, but it's this. The rebels, the fighters, the separatists, who probably shot down the plane, but we don't know, by mistake, they thought it was an incoming Ukrainian military plane. And by the way, that plane was off course. Why was it over Donetsk? In fact, why would any commercial airline be flying over Ukraine in the last 2 or 3 weeks when there have been air wars? I mean, who runs the International Aviation Authority? Right. Those planes never should have been anywhere near Ukraine. You or I would not get on a plane if the pilot said, hey, guys, you're going to have a great view out the window. You want to see a war? We're going to fly over Donetsk. We'd get off that plane before it departed. But the point is, the rebels have said that they will declare a humanitarian ceasefire so that the investigators, the inspectors, can get to the crash site. If Kiev says, okay, we will too, we have a window of opportunity during this ceasefire for political negotiations to end this war. Now, there was a ceasefire that lasted 3 or 4 days, and the president of Ukraine called it off with the backing of the United States and against the opposition, hear me on this, against the opposition of Germany and France. The only way a political negotiation can come about is if there's a ceasefire. Now there may be one born of tragedy if the rebels act on what they've promised, a humanitarian ceasefire, and Kiev agrees. Then the fighting will stop, the inspectors will go in, Obama, Putin, Merkel, Brussels, the UN can do what we pay them to do in this war. So there is a slight ray of hope, and we'll probably know today or tomorrow or the next day whether it's going to be realized. That's the only decent news that comes out of this horror.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of like a bucket of cold water in the face, I'm guessing, for the rebels, particularly if there's a local group that, thought they were gleefully shooting a Ukrainian plane out of the sky, and then they see bodies raining down on top of them.
Yeah, but Tom, here's the problem. There's not one group. The rebels are, there's a lot of them now. There's thousands and thousands of them, and they've got weapons, and they're getting more weapons. Where they're getting from, we could have another discussion about that. Yeah. But the problem is they aren't a united group. There are different militias fighting in different areas under different field commanders and with different political support.
Wow. Professor Stephen Cohen, it is always a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thank you so much for dropping by.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.